Alright, discussion and motion to approve the Scarmazzi Homes Phase 2 Highland Village Development based upon the recommendations of the township engineer.
Do I get to start?
You get to start the discussion,
Okay,
since it's all
great.
based on your opinion.
Sure. So, to bring everybody up to speed where we left off earlier this month, our office wrote a letter on February 2nd, which recommended we table the plan to allow for the resolution of the questions at Hidden Hollow Road without right-of-way and the PennDOT liquid fuel requirements, reimbursement requirements. We did receive the time extension request from the applicant, which relieves the township of their 90-day obligation to review and take action on the plan. Since then, T3, who's the consulting engineer for Scarmazzi, revised their application. They changed their right-of-way drawing and their written description. I confirmed with Rick Skavinsky at PennDOT that the revisions to that right-of-way for Hidden Hollow Road would be such that at the conclusion of the plan, the township could take over that roadway and be reimbursed via the liquid fuels program. So, in my opinion, that issue's been resolved. That question has been answered.
The initial issue was,
That's not the
one
full
second, the initial issue was, when I first looked at the plan, when I first became solicitor, we had a meeting up there. And the way that drawing was initially set up is that if we'd have taken the road over, we would not, the township would not have gotten liquid fuels because why?
Because there's no viable
Cul-de-sac.
turnaround.
Correct. So basically, we'd have taken the road over, and that's the reason why, after I looked at it, we had discussions with you, was that we had to make certain that if we take any roads over, that we get liquid fuels money.
That's correct.
And that's what you did, that's the reason why this was delayed because of it.
That's correct.
Well, one thing about it now, you're not taking the whole road over, you're only going up there where
That's
you turn
correct.
into the housing plan. That's as far as you go with township for liquid fuel monies. You know, that's not the whole
Yeah, but we
road.
won't be maintaining the rest of
Well,
it, that's
no,
gonna
I
be a
know-
private
well, but
driveway
when
up
we
to
say
that
the Hidden
building.
Hollow Road, there are some people think it's the whole road. It's not the whole road. It's only where you go up there and turn into the housing plan. That is what would be under.
Yeah, but you also wouldn't, that's
So-
basically a drive.
So what will happen, Mr. Parrish, is when we when we take over that road, there'll have to be some type of description, and there'll have to be some type of drawing prepared by either you or the developer, and that will be attached to an ordinance saying we're adopting that road as part of the
Yes.
system.
Yes.
Because that way we'll know what we're having, okay?
Right.
So that will be all worked out.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, but it's not the whole road all the way up in there. It just goes where you turn into the housing plan.
Right, you're correct, Steve.
Right.
So, when they revised their right-of-way drawing for Hidden Hollow Road, they stopped their public right-of-way at the intersection where you turn right and go into the plan. In so doing, they've established a viable turnaround which allows, you know,
Right.
the PennDOT liquid fuel reimbursement requirements to be met,
Right.
which was confirmed by Penn.
Right.
And, you know, Rick's retiring at March 31st.
Rick's retiring, yeah, so,
Not a month.
to carry on here, our office prepared a second recommendation letter dated February 13th, which is in the packet, which I dropped off there. The packet also contains the revised right-of-way drawing for Hidden Hollow Road, which shows the future public ownership ending at the intersection, like we previously discussed. The written description, the Scarmazzi time extension request, and the executed easement agreements from Phase 1, which allow them access and construction improvements to construct the improvements at Hidden Hollow Road. So as I said earlier, and thank you for clarifying, I believe the ownership and PennDOT liquid fuel reimbursement requirements at Hidden Hollow Road, that question's been answered, that issue's been resolved. And at this time, it's my opinion that we can recommend approval of the Phase 2 subdivision plan as revised by T3 and Scarmazzi.
Well, the only problem is, we don't wanna take over that stormwater, going across the road to Van Boris.
Underneath 88?
No.
Underneath.
What happened was, there was an agreement between, the township, there was an agreement between Van Boris, is that how you say his name? And PC, and, Scarmazzi to take over some type of stormwater facility going on to Van Boris's property. And that agreement called for, they said we were gonna take over stormwater facility. Okay, and then basically, I looked at the agreement is actually Peters Creek Sanitary Authority to take that over, which I know that they
It's
were.
the same as you're talking about, but it's going on to this property to go to that pipe to 88. So what
Okay.
he's talking about is it going over to this property before leading to that.
It's further, you know, when you
You're talking about the cross drains underneath?
cross
the
drains
roadway?
going over
Yeah.
across the thing. We don't wanna take that over, do we?
I guess ultimately it depends on what was agreed upon in the phase one
Well,
agreement.
I don't know, I mean, all I know
Are you
is that
saying, are you saying?
there was an agreement between, Scarmazzi and Van Voorst about something like this, that Van Voorst gave Scarmazzi the ability to put his stormwater onto his,
Okay, see, I'm not familiar with any of that.
so
I'm assuming most of that was addressed during phase one.
I don't know. We can make,
Mr. Scarmazzi showed us the agreement, but it was
Right.
signed off on by Peters Creek Sanitary for some reason, and
well, see, when I talked to their attorney, they said they couldn't understand why the township would take it over anyway. They wanted to do it themselves. So what we could do is we could just make a motion to accept phase two of the Scarmazzi subdivision, subject to,
Well, let me ask you this, are they gonna have to re-record those easements anyway, since they've revised where the public ownership's gonna end? Could we just address the ownership of this stormwater at Hidden Hollow Road as part of the revised easement agreements that would need to take place?
well, I think,
I wasn't aware of any stormwater
there's a
questions
stormwater,
regarding future ownership.
I don't have a problem taking the road over, I really don't. But taking stormwater going to somebody else's property, I know when we do developments out of Square, that's a problem we don't like to handle too much.
Yeah, the question was, there was a pipe gonna go over there, and the township was gonna have to maintain that pipe on private property. And while we don't wanna go on private property, and if we're gonna do that and start that precedent, then you gotta do the whole township.
Absolutely.
So I think basically make a motion to accept the phase two subdivision plan document, the phase two subdivision plan document, Highland Village, incorporating the adoption of the Hidden Hollow Road, is that what it's called?
That's right.
Okay,
And the board would be approving the phase two
correct,
subdivision plan.
correct.
Right.
So that's that's what I would recommend.
well,
Okay, so,
You know, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further, when I raised this issue at the last meeting about the stormwater coming off that project, and if that strip mall's constructed, we're going to add to the outflow of stormwater into Union Valley. Now, one of the township meetings last year, Mr. Arshman, former township engineer, was asked the question about controlling that additional water flow into Union Valley. We all know how badly those people along that valley get flooded when we have deluges. Mr. Harshman said that there was some sort of construction, TJ, anticipated, I guess like a retention, a super retention pond, to hold back and control the outflow of that water into Union Valley. Has there been any further discussion about that? I don't remember that. Now, we were told, referencing the meeting that Mr. Maple talked about, we had with Mr. Scarmazzi and one of his assistants, that all the state agencies, county agencies, said that Mr. Scarmazzi had met his obligations for water control. That's where it ends. But Union Township doesn't end there. It's going to end when all that additional water is dumped in the vicinity of the old Mineral Beach to flow down through Union Valley. And TJ, maybe you ought to call Harshman, ask him what was being anticipated to control that water coming off of those projects into Union Valley?
So your question and your comment is a good one, Larry, and you're right. There are local, Union Township has a stormwater management ordinance which governs the release of stormwater runoff under the post-construction scenario. Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the County Conservation District, they also have stormwater management requirements. So you're correct. Scarmazzi would have and obtained a NPDES construction stormwater discharge permit, which requires that development to control the amount of stormwater runoff volume and the rate at which the runoff volume exits the site. When that permit was issued, the state, the county, the conservation district, those entities had an opportunity to review the post-construction stormwater management plan, determined that the stormwater management controls were adequate. The township engineer at the time presumably would have reviewed the stormwater management plan to confirm that it was adequate relative to the township stormwater management ordinance. And certainly that would take place under any future development of the Highland Plaza that's being discussed now. Every land development is required to fulfill those same stormwater management regulations. Now, relative to conveyance away from the project site underneath the state highway there by Mineral Beach, as you're referring to, ownership of those stormwater facilities transfers to PennDOT at some point underneath that state highway. PennDOT owns the storm sewer in that area. So it's, to answer your question, it's a very layered and very complex situation that's happening there. As I understand it, the post-construction stormwater management plan for Scarmazzi, for that planned residential development, covered the entire build out of the site. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So the phase 2 construction has already been planned for and accounted for as part of the land development reviews and stormwater management reviews that would have been done by PADEP and the Conservation District and the township previously. That's my understanding at this time.
I'm gonna say though, I don't think on any water in my cellar anymore.
Did you get the whole thing straightened out with the building permit?
Yes, that's coming along. There was, got about half of it coming from the phase 1 issue.
Phase 1?
I'm sorry, phase 2. We actually got a first inspection. There is a couple of reporting that we need to look into. We're working toward that right now.
All right, so basically, here's a motion, I think you want to adopt. A motion to approve Scarmazzi Homes Phase 2 Highland Village Development. Based upon,
It's the way it is so far, it's not changed so far.
based upon the recommendation of the township engineer, with the township, good night, folks. It costs $5 to leave, by the way.
Yeah, but I get up at 4 a.m.
I get the 5 a.m.
I'm past my bedtime.
I'm doing
What the
good.
meeting for?
Trying.
Okay, so we
So-
were at
so
recommendation
motion-
of the township
Crazy
engineer.
fit.
With
Just
the
go to bed,
township
just
to
get up at
assume
4.
no responsibility for the stormwater that is subject to a grant of storm sewer easement dated 10/31/22 by and between
The date again, 10/31.
10/31/22 by and between Mr. Van Voorst,
Voorhees.
how do you spell his name, say his name?
Robert P. Van Voorst Jr.
And
Right.
Scarmazzi Highland. Okay, this will only take over stormwater.
Okay, with the township to assume no responsibility for stormwater that is subject to an agreement. 1038 between Mr. Van Voorst and Scarmazzi Homes. Okay, I'd
Okay.
like to make that motion. Any second?
You know second, Laura?
Yes.
Okay.
Dennis, when you
Second.
talk about stormwater, that motion,
Who made the motion?
you're
I
talking,
did.
you're talking about the, call it the local site.
But what there was, is when I went to that meeting at the Scarmazzi, there was a situation where there was stormwater going from the Scarmazzi development
Right.
onto the property owned by Van Voorhees or whatever.
The self-storage.
So, and basically, when you try to stay away, if you're a township employee, you try to stay away from assuming responsibility of stormwater, because it becomes a liability.
Right. Now, TJ, in reference to what you said about the MPDES
Yes.
permit, are you satisfied that there are appropriate plans in place once the water exits off the site that Dennis is speaking about into the state drain, that the outflow, the volume of water is going to be regulated?
I haven't seen anything in their phase 2 application that states that they're gonna deviate from what was previously approved by the township engineer, by the county conservation district, and by PADEP.
You haven't seen any of those plans yet?
So, our office did not review the stormwater management plan that was previously approved as part of phase 1. That's correct, yes.
And it's part of that, I guess,
We've made a motion yet.
Michelle and Chuck made the motions. Just to add to your motion, amend your motion to include, and the township will assume no responsibility for stormwater for the project, unless otherwise agreed to previously. Okay?
Okay, so not just stormwater, but is subject to the
Just
agreement.
adding that last statement on,
No responsibility.
unless
Okay.
otherwise, unless previously agreed to.
So I'd like to amend my motion to say that. Do you still wish the second?
I will still second.
Okay.
We've already previously, not our board, but it's already been previously agreed. You can't go back on all that.
No, but we didn't agree to that
We didn't
agreement.
agree to the,
That easement was
to take
between,
over the stormwater.
the agreement was between Van Voorst and Scarmazzi.
Right, so that's a private agreement.
But it's between them, but the problem is, if you have an agreement that's gonna bind another party, a third party, that party has to sign off on that, okay? No one ever
We're just stating
signed
we have
off
no
on it.
responsibility for that
Right.
agreement.
No one signed, if we were supposed to be responsible in Peters Creek, then those entities would have had to sign off on that, no one did. I'd be like me saying, I'm going to, reach an agreement with, TJ to sell Harold's car, without Harold signing off on the car. Okay?
Okay.
Is it a nice car, Dennis?
So roll
Harold
call.
don't need a car.
Yes.
Bar,